Hey guys, tonight we nestle deep inside a Viking longhouse. No insulation, no privacy, and no central heating. Just you 50 other people, a few dozen animals, and the creeping realization that winter here isn't a season. It's a slow siege. You blink awake in total darkness. The only sounds are snoring, coughing, and the occasional whimper from somewhere to your left. You're on a bed of straw, itchy, lumpy, and not even entirely yours. Someone's elbow nudges your side. You turn, and they grunt in their sleep. Welcome to winter in a Viking longhouse, where personal space is a modern myth, and the cold is your most loyal companion. It's not just cold. It's the kind of cold that seeps into your bones, makes your teeth ache, and turns every breath into a visible puff. You reach for your fur wrap, but it's half stolen by whoever's curled next to you. Sharing is caring, even if you hate each other by spring. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in a Viking longhouse sometime around the 9th century. It's about 80 feet long, built from timber planks and sod insulation, with a central hearth that runs like a spine down the middle. One hole in the roof serves both as chimney and sunlight portal. Today it's shut tight against the snow. The fire's gone out again. Not entirely, but it's mostly just embers. No one dares get up to stoke it. Too cold. You could try, but the floor is freezing dirt packed so hard, it might as well be ice. Your breath fogs in front of you, joining the soft vapor of a dozen others. Someone's feet are dangerously close to your face. You gently nudge them away, pretending not to be offended. Sleeping arrangements aren't really arranged. You collapse wherever there's space. Families tend to cluster together, but guests, servants, and livestock helpers get wedged in wherever they fit. Last night you were next to the fire. Tonight, you're one bad sneeze away from the drafty wall. Speaking of drafts, there's one now. A squealing gust sneaks in through a crack near the door, and you instinctively curl tighter. A low, whining wind outside keeps battering the wooden frame. You imagine snow piling up just beyond the threshold, burying the whole longhouse like a trapped beast. And yet, you're not alone. That's the upside. The body heat of 30 to 50 people and a few goats does raise the indoor temperature slightly. The smell, though, is intense. It's sour, sweaty, and oddly sweet. A Viking historian once said that the scent of a wintering longhouse is like a barn had a fever dream. He was being polite. There's no real light. Maybe a smoldering oil lamp near the chieftain's side, casting a faint yellow glow. You think you hear someone whispering a prayer, probably to Thor or Freyr, or maybe just begging for slightly less frostbite tonight. You try to stretch, but your shoulders protest. Sleeping curled up has turned your spine into something resembling a ship's twisted rigging. You sit up slowly and immediately regret it. Your head bumps the low rafter. Again, the beams are sturdy oak, hacked by hand and covered with soot. Your hair now carries the memory of 10 winters' worth of smoke. Historically, Viking longhouses were multi-purpose sleeping quarters. Workshop, barn, kitchen, storage space, and community center all rolled into one. Efficiency wasn't a choice. It was survival. But the design came at a price. With no interior walls, noise and odor had free reign. So did gossip, arguments, and laughter, though in February, not much of that last one. You shuffle to the edge of your bedding, more straw, maybe a tattered woolen blanket if you're lucky. You nudge aside a basket and a wooden scoop someone used last night for who knows what. Your foot lands on something soft and warm. It bleats. Goat. A good sign, really. Goats are warmth. Goats are food eventually. Goats are also known to nibble on your hair if you're not careful. You offer a gentle pat more for your own comfort than the goats. Historians still argue whether livestock were always kept inside for the entire winter or only during storm. But in this version of your life, they're absolutely here. You can hear pigs snuffling at the far end, maybe rooting through old hay. Someone mutters a sleepy curse as a cow shifts and knocks over a wooden pail. You think about lying back down, but that would mean facing someone's armpit again. Instead, you just sit, eyes half closed, letting the sounds of the house hum around you. It's oddly meditative. The fires crackle, the soft breathing, a child mumbling through a dream. It creates a strange lullaby. You pull your blanket tighter. Tomorrow you'll fetch water from a frozen stream if the path isn't blocked. You'll help salt a barrel of fish or patch a fur cloak. Tonight, you just try to keep your toes from going numb. And that, my frozen friend, is how your Viking winter begins. In darkness, surrounded by strangers, livestock, and one barely glowing fire that everyone's pretending will last till morning. You decide to brave it. Not the outside world, not yet, but the slow, careful crawl toward the hearth in the center of the Longhouse. Your toes press into the cold, packed dirt as you edge forward, trying not to step on anyone or anything important. You pass a sleeping elder wrapped in furs, a toddler who's managed to escape their blanket, and a dog, so still, you're not entirely sure it's alive. It grunts when you bump it. Still alive, still grumpy. The hearth is low and long, a shallow trench filled with embers and a few fragile tongues of flame. 2 blackened logs smolder lazily, doing their best to look productive. You squat beside the warmth and hold your hands out. But the fire offers only the faintest flicker of heat. Your fingers, red and raw, feel like they belong to someone else. You glance around. No one else is tending the fire. That's not surprising. Tending it means gathering fuel, and fuel is harder to come by than fresh air in here. Wood was likely chopped and hauled weeks ago, stacked in some dry corner or buried under snow. And here's the kicker. Firewood is rationed. Not by strict law, but by unspoken politics. The closer your bedroll is to the hearth, the higher your place in the household. You're not top tier. That's the chieftain's family and closest retainers. They're nestled near the warmth with actual furs and not too moldy straw. You, meanwhile, are somewhere in the middle. Important enough to be indoors, not important enough to warm your feet without negotiating. A low cough comes from the shadows behind you, followed by a voice gruff and unimpressed. Don't waste it. You freeze. Someone's watching. Of course they are. The fire belongs to everyone, but that doesn't mean everyone gets equal access. You nod silently and shift back a few inches, still soaking in whatever warmth you can while looking appropriately humbled. Historians still argue whether Viking hearths were kept lit continuously or allowed to die down each night to conserve fuel. Some claim they smoldered 247, a heartbeat of the home. Others argue it depended entirely on the season status, or just who had the energy to bother. Either way, you've learned, don't hug the fire. It's communal property like gossip lice and disappointment. You study the hearth more closely now. A clay pot hangs suspended over the lowest flame, blackened and bubbling softly. It smells faintly of onion and fish, maybe cabbage. Though that could be your imagination playing cruel tricks. Someone must have left it to stew overnight, probably hoping the slow cook will soften yesterday's leftovers into something vaguely edible. You're tempted to peek inside, but rules here are quiet and sharp. Don't steal food, don't move someone's boots, and absolutely don't wake the baby. That baby whose cry you can hear in your bones already will turn this whole Longhouse into a hellscape if it stirs. So you retreat, inching backward on cold hands and knees, careful not to brush the hot edges of the hearth. You don't have shoes on, not inside. Most people don't. Why risk tracking in snow and muck when it'll only turn the floor into a swamp? You left your worn leather boots near the entrance last night. You hope no one borrowed them? You curl up again in your spot, slightly warmer now, from the fire visit, slightly more awake, which is unfortunate. Sleep is a precious currency in the Longhouse, traded in short, uneven doses. Too much light from the fire. Too loud from someone's nightmare. Or maybe your own back is rebelling against straw bedding again. Tough luck. There are no quiet hours in here. A joke flickers in your brain, one you heard from the merchant's son before the snows came. The Vikings invented central heating by putting everyone in the same room and calling it cozy. You smirk into the dark, even as you shiver. Fun fact, longhouses like this weren't just for winter. They were year-round homes. But in winter, every flaw shows its face. The smoke from the fire has nowhere to go. It climbs slowly, then hovers in a low, choking layer beneath the beams. Your eyes sting. Your throat burns. You bury your face in your sleeve and wonder how the elders managed to survive this for decades. Maybe they've just stopped noticing. Quirky aside, Some evidence suggests that Longhouse rafters were intentionally left smoky, not just as a fluke of bad design, but to preserve the wood and discourage pests. Nothing like hotboxing your own ceiling to keep the termites away. Viking solutions, truly. Eventually you lie back down. The fire hasn't grown any stronger, but your body is too tired to care. Your stomach rumbles. Your nose is cold, but the dog has stopped snoring and the baby hasn't woken up yet. So you close your eyes again, wondering if tomorrow will bring sun snow or something worse. And just as you're drifting off, someone farts. Loudly. Of course. You come to again a little later. But this time, it's not the cold that wakes you. It's the air. Not just the smell, though. Let's be clear, the scent is still aggressively present. But the thickness of it. You take a breath and your lungs protest. It's like trying to inhale the inside of a stew pot. Dense, smoky, humid in the worst way. You cough into your sleeve and try again. Nope. Still tastes like wood smoke, sweat, and damp wool. The Viking Longhouse is an engineering compromise. Heat stays in because there are no windows. No windows means no ventilation. And no ventilation means you, my friend, are now part of a slow-cooking soup of human exhalation and ash particles. Congratulations, you're the garnish. You roll onto your side nose, pressed into your tunic sleeve. It filters out just enough that you don't gag. Around you, others are adjusting, groaning, shifting in their sleep. The baby makes a wet little noise. Someone shushes them with a whisper. You're all just waiting for the light, for the first sign of dawn, slipping through the smoke hole above. Only there won't be much light. In winter especially, this far north, daylight is more suggestion than fact. Maybe 4 hours of murky gray, if the snow clouds are feeling generous. So even morning is still dim, still firelit. And this means the interior of the Longhouse stays in a permanent twilight. Golden, at best, shadowy, at worst. Historians still argue whether the Vikings adapted psychologically to the lack of light or simply endured it. Maybe both. Seasonal affective disorder wasn't named yet, but you're feeling it. Everyone's a little moodier, a little more silent, a little quicker to snap if their blanket gets pulled off mid-sleep. You sit up again slowly, because too much movement makes the smoke shift like fog. You can just barely make out the rafters above low and heavy with soot. Cobwebs connect them like lazy, ashy bridges. Moss clings to the corners. Part insulation, part decoration, part weird green room made. That's right. Insulation wasn't fiberglass back then. It was layers of turf moss and sometimes seaweed stuffed into wall joints to keep out drafts. It works. Barely. But the downside? Moisture. Lots of it. And where there's moisture, there's mold. You can practically feel the spores flirting with your sinuses. A droplet of condensed smoke juice drips from a rafter and lands with a soft splat on someone's blanket. They don't stir. Veteran move. You'll learn to ignore it too eventually. Now you notice the ash? It coats everything. The floor, your skin, your blanket, the inside of your nostril. You lick your lips and taste it. It's somehow both gritty and greasy. Fire is essential, but also kind of a jerk. A voice breaks the haze, a soft mutter from the elder near the hearth. They're up now, poking at the coals with a long iron rod. You hear the hiss of a fresh log meeting ember. The glow brightens briefly, illuminating the room with flickering amber. Shadows leap. Faces appear, then vanish again, like ghosts. You catch someone's eye across the way. Just for a second. Neither of you says anything. No one talks much this early. Language takes energy, and energy is hoarded like meat in the winter. Still the fire crackles, and there's a rhythm to it that's comforting. It's one of the few constants in this place. The warmth it offers is a slow-building thing. You won't feel it immediately, but if you stay close, and if you keep feeding it just enough without drawing the wrath of the hierarchy, it will eventually work its way back into your bones. You start to notice patterns. The thick air near the ceiling. The way smoke curls and swirls, depending on how many people are breathing heavily. The slight draft that snakes in under the door, then loops through the low parts of the room like a curious fox. It's not random. It's just chaotic on purpose. Quirky fact. Some reconstructions of Viking longhouses suggest that people might have created air zones by hanging hides or weaving reed dividers to control the flow of smoke. Like primitive HVAC systems, you're tempted to try, but you doubt anyone would appreciate your amateur attempt at Viking interior design. Instead, you press a corner of your blanket against your mouth and lie back again. This has become your unofficial filter, your tiny rebellion against the suffocating gloom. You think about what the Longhouse looked like in summer. Brighter, breezier, less crowded. Probably smelled a lot better too. Maybe, but now. In the deep clench of winter, everything is closed tight. Every creak of the wood is louder. Every breath is heavier. And yet, strangely, the longer you lie there, the more your body adjusts. The smoke becomes background. The stench becomes context. The cold feels normal. And that's the trick, really. You don't beat winter in a Viking longhouse. You let it smother you into submission, and eventually you stop minding. Well, until someone sneezes directly into the shared blanket. Yeah, that's going to linger. You try to ignore the sneeze, but it echoes through the longhouse like a war horn of doom. A few groggy grumbles rise from the straw heaps. Someone mutters a curse under their breath. The baby stirs. You hold your breath, silently pleading to the gods of quiet that it doesn't escalate. But it does. The baby begins to wail, high-pitched, urgent, and surprisingly powerful for something the size of a bread loaf. There's movement now. People are shifting, rolling over, muttering louder. You know what this means. The longhouse is waking up, and the bathroom problem is about to become very real. You try to beat the rush, slipping your feet into stiff woolen socks and hoping no one has taken your boots. You edge toward the door. Oh no, the floor is cold as betrayal. You pass a man trying to change a baby's linen under his cloak, and a teenager already shoving feet into goat-hide shoes like they're in some kind of race. You're not sure what the prize is, but you assume it's first use of the chamber pot before it's full. Now here's the part no one romanticizes about Viking life. Toilets didn't exist. Not really. What you have instead is a communal arrangement of extreme humility. Maybe it's a lidded wooden bucket tucked near the back of the house. Maybe it's a short walk outside to a pit latrine carved out and loosely covered. Maybe, if the weather's bad, or your luck worse, it's just a moss-lined hole in a frozen log. Right now, the bucket wins. It's the closest. You lift the cloth curtain, hiding the corner, and immediately regret it. The smell hits like a slap with a hot fish. You try to breathe through your mouth, but that somehow makes it worse. Your eyes water. You rethink your life choices. Still nature calls. And winter is not gentle on bladders. You take care of business quickly, trying not to fall into the bucket. A very real concern. It's happened. You notice someone's left their mittens hanging on a peg nearby. Bold move? You suspect this means they're either incredibly forgetful or have fully given up on the concept of hygiene. Hard to say which. Historians still argue whether Viking sanitation habits were ahead of their time or just cleverly gross. Some evidence suggests they used moss or even snow for wiping effective but cold. Others say they used scraps of wool or linen rags, which is practical until you remember someone has to wash those. Probably you, if you're low enough on the longhouse pecking order. You step out of the makeshift bathroom corner, nose wrinkled, and spot someone heading for the exit, actually opening the door. Their bundled up face nearly hidden under layers of fur and cloth. Snow pours in around them like powdered doom. The cold bites the room instantly. Everyone groans. You hear at least one insult. Still, a few people start suiting up. Some tasks can't wait even in winter. Someone has to fetch water. Someone else will check on the livestock pens outside. And yes, someone gets to deal with the latrine hole in the snow. You silently pray it's not your turn. You decide to stay in for now. The fire's been stoked again modestly. Enough to keep fingers and toes alive, not enough to make anyone sweat. People are awake now, seated on low stools or logs, wrapped in cloaks. The longhouse begins to murmur. It's odd, but there's something deeply intimate about sharing every part of life with this many people. The privacy lines are blurred, no erased. You know what everyone smells like. You know who snores, who talks in their sleep, who occasionally farts in Morse code. You've seen people at their worst. Sick, frozen, crying quietly into hay. You've seen them hold their babies and hum old songs too. A boy about 10 years old passes you carrying a wooden ladle and a serious expression. He's headed for the chamber pot. You salute him like a soldier. He nods solemn. Quirky fact of the day. There's some archaeological evidence that Vikings might have used dried animal dung as fuel when wood was scarce. Not ideal for the aroma, but hey, it burns. Technically, you eye the goats, just in case. You try to shake the smell from your nostrils and return to your straw pile. You still haven't found your boots. You start to worry they really are gone. Borrowed, stolen, or accidentally fed to the pigs. You hope it was the first one? Maybe someone just needed to run outside for a moment and they'll be back soon. You can dream. The air now is a strange mix. Wood smoke, sweat manure, damp wool, and whatever's cooking over the hearth, probably fish again. Your senses have mostly shut down in self-defense. You sit down cross-legged and take a deep breath. Mistake, but you're committed now. You glance toward the small soot-darkened slit in the wall, meant to let in air, though it mostly just lets in frost and the occasional snowflake. A little morning light filters through barely enough to cast shadows. Someone yawns so hard they dislocate their jaw. At least that's what it sounds like. The baby has gone quiet, thank the gods. A mother hums gently in the background. Someone's sharpening a knife with slow rhythmic strokes. A dog stretches and lets out the loudest sigh you've ever heard. This is morning in the Viking world. No bathroom doors, no toothpaste. Just cold floors, awkward eye contact, and the smell of everyone's everything, and you haven't even had breakfast yet. You try not to get your hopes up, but your stomach, that treacherous beast, begins to growl anyway. It's morning, or as close as winter allows, and that means breakfast, or what passes for it. You follow the smell, or at least the absence of the worst smells, toward the hearth, where the pot from last night still hangs bubbling faintly. You hover nearby like a hopeful crow. The older woman in charge of the food, let's call her Astrid, because she looks like someone who'd survived 3 plagues and a sea raid, glances your way. Her expression says, "Don't even think about it." You think about it anyway. Breakfast in the Viking Longhouse isn't glamorous. You're not waking up to sizzling bacon and warm bread. You're waking up to something grayish, something lumpy, something vaguely sour, and definitely reused. That pot hasn't been emptied since last week. It just keeps getting added to. Grain broth, bits of dried fish, old turnips, some herbs, if you're lucky. If you're really lucky, there's a chunk of meat. If not, you chew and pretend. Astrid ladles out portions into wooden bowls, carefully measured, because there's only so much to go around. She hands one to the chieftain's son first. Of course, you pretend not to care. You're offered yours a few minutes later, a small scoop of something warm, sticky, and the color of apathy. You take your bowl back to your straw pile and sit cross-legged, blowing on the steaming mush. You recognize a familiar scent: fermented barley. That's right. It's porridge, probably with maybe some sour milk stirred in for flavor. Historians still argue whether the Viking diet during winter was diverse or dangerously repetitive. Some sources suggest they had dried fruits, nuts, even imported luxuries. Others point out that for most people, it was oats, fish, and regret on a loop. You spoon some into your mouth and instantly wince. It's hot and cold. Somehow both. The texture is glue adjacent with occasional chewy surprises, possibly bone, possibly something worse. You chew slowly, trying to look grateful. Someone nearby lets out a delighted grunt. They found a bit of meat in theirs. A genuine cube of smoked lamb, probably left over from a feast and forgotten. It's the Viking version of winning the lottery. Everyone pretends not to notice. But there's a silent, burning envy radiating from the straw pile. One guy asks, "You gonna eat that?" With a grin that's only half joking. The lucky lamb winner growls back and shields their bowl like it's a newborn. You keep eating, because it's this or nothing. And even if the food tastes like betrayal, at least it's warm. You chase it with water from a shared wooden ladle. Icy cold, vaguely murky, but drinkable. Probably. The ladle's passed around, wiped on sleeves, dipped back in. You try not to think about it. Someone across the room sneezes into their bowl and keeps eating. You look away. Quirky fact. Some Norse folks flavored their porridge with onion herbs, or even honey when they had it. There's even evidence they made grain-based beer porridge with leftover ale. You're beginning to wish this morning's bowl had a little buzz. A child sitting nearby begins poking at their portion like it might jump. Their mother swats their hand. "Eat," she says in a low voice. The child eats. Everyone's got a tone in winter flat, tired business-like. The Longhouse doesn't allow for moods longer than 10 minutes. You eat. You work. You try not to get sick. Your own portion is halfway gone when you feel a texture shift. Not a good one. Something stringy, rubbery. You pause, glance down. Seaweed, possibly tendon. You chew it anyway. Protein is protein. And hey, your jaw will thank you someday for the workout. After eating, people begin shifting toward their tasks. There's no time for lounging, not even in the cold. One man stands and starts checking the tools an axe head needs rebinding. A woman by the door is already sorting through furs to mend. A few children are sent out to fetch snow to melt for water. And you've been assigned hide scraping today. Delightful. Before you go, you carefully rinse your bowl with a splash of cold water from the barrel near the hearth. Not clean, but good enough. You wipe it with a cloth so stained it may once have been a curtain, and tuck the bowl back into your belongings, because everyone has their own bowl. If you lose it, you're eating out of your hands like a dog, or not eating at all. You stretch your muscles stiff from another night of folding yourself into a half-human position on straw. You stand up slowly, cloak wrapped around you, and brace yourself for the next trial of Viking life. No, not battle, not conquest. Just a full day of freezing, scraping, lifting, and hoping you don't drop something on your foot again. But hey, at least you got breakfast. You step outside, and the cold punches you straight in the soul. It's a full-body experience. Your eyes water, your teeth ache, and something deep in your chest clenches like it's considering hibernation. The snow crunches under your worn boots. Yes, they were returned, probably by guilt or frostbite. And the wind greets you with the enthusiasm of a Viking berserker. You adjust your fur cloak tighter, pull your wool cap lower, and begin the day's labor. Today's assignment, hide scraping, which, if you're unfamiliar, is exactly as glamorous as it sounds. The hides, animal skins, stretched and frozen stiff, are stacked near the side of the Longhouse, half buried under snow. You dig them out with numb fingers, each one curling at the edges like some icy prehistoric pizza crust. They smell like death and wet dog. You pretend not to mind. You haul a few into the open, lay them out across wooden frames, and grab your scraper, a simple tool little more than a flat blade lashed to a handle. Then you begin. Long, slow pulls removing the bits of fat and sinew clinging to the skin like it's trying to stay relevant. It's not easy work. Your shoulders ache, your fingers scream, and let's not forget, you're doing all this while trying not to freeze solid. The wind whips around your legs and snow snakes across the ground in angry little twisters. Somewhere in the distance, you hear goats complaining. You mentally echo them. Historians still argue whether everyone in a Norse household shared labor equally, or whether strict roles were enforced by gender and age. Either way, the result is the same. Unless you're the chieftain's grandmother or very good at faking illness. You're working, you glance over. Someone's chopping wood nearby, each swing sending chips of frozen birch flying like angry confetti. Another person is repairing fishing nets. A teenager tries to break the ice in the water trough with a rock. The rock loses. And here you are, reducing your fingertips to calluses so a future cloak or boot can exist. There's something satisfyingly primal about it for about 10 minutes. Then your nose starts to drip, your lower back throbs, and you remember you haven't sat down properly in 3 days. Quirky detail. Viking hide workers sometimes used fermented urine to help soften the hides. You're not doing that today, thankfully, but the smell of the leather suggests someone has. You try not to think about it as you scrape. Occasionally, someone inside the Longhouse will call out a request for more firewood for water, or just to complain about how someone else stole their blanket. You keep your head down. Hide scraping gives you one rare advantage: plausible deniability. No one wants to walk through the cold and the stink just to accuse you of anything. You pause to stretch your fingers. Your gloves aren't thick enough. They never are. Your knuckles feel like they've been replaced with ice cubes. You tuck your hands under your armpits for a moment, hopping from foot to foot like a deranged chicken. It helps a little. Someone walks past and mutters, "Don't freeze." You mutter back, "Too late." You keep working. Eventually, a bowl of something warm is brought out. Barley broth, maybe a bit of leftover stew, and you take it with both hands. Like it's a holy relic. It scalds your tongue. But you drink anyway, letting the warmth trickle down like sunlight in your chest. Historians agree that winters were long and brutal in the Norse world, but they also point to the sense of shared struggle. This wasn't solitary suffering. This was group endurance. You worked together. You ate together. You survived or didn't together. The sky is a flat pale gray, the kind that offers no real distinction between time and mood. It could be morning or almost dusk. The sun's just a rumor behind the clouds, and every shadow feels static. You finish one hide and begin another. Your motions slowing now, each scrape more of a gentle nudge. The stink's gotten into your cloak, your hands, your everything. You wonder if you'll ever smell clean again. Then you remember. This is clean by Viking standards. A kid trudges by, dragging firewood, nose-red arms shaking. You both nod in solidarity. There's no shame in misery here, only survival, and the occasional sarcastic grunt. When you finally pause to straighten your spine, you hear it. Laughter. Well, not a lot. Just a few short bursts from behind the Longhouse. Someone slipped on ice. Probably the same someone who took your boots earlier. You allow yourself a single chuckle before your face cracks like old parchment from the cold. And that's the rhythm of Viking winter labor. Scrape, freeze, drink, freeze, curse, freeze, laugh, maybe, and then keep going. You don't stop because you're tired. You stop because the sun, such as it is setting, or your fingers no longer feel attached to your body. Whichever comes first. You stack the hides, return your tools, and stamp snow from your boots as you re-enter the Longhouse. The heat, or what passes for it, hits you like a moist, smoky curtain, and for a second it almost feels good. You're back inside, and the warmth, if you can call it that, settles over your skin like a damp wool blanket that someone left too close to the fire. Still, it's better than the wind. You breathe in, and the familiar haze of smoke, ash, sweat, and animal musk greets your lungs like an old friend who doesn't believe in deodorant. You slump onto your straw pile muscles, aching in new places. The kind of tired you feel now is deep, earthy, and oddly satisfying. Your hands are raw. Your cloak smells like fermented goat, but you're inside. You've survived another few hours of winter. That doesn't mean you get to relax. You hear your name called, probably. The voice is muffled by layers of chatter coughing, and the gentle bleating of some goat who thinks it deserves a better spot by the hearth. You sit up, look around, and lock eyes with Astrid again. The cook, she points. You've been reassigned. No nap, no break. Time to help with chores. Again, this time. Mundingir. You shuffle over to a low bench near the door, where a pile of clothing sacks and torn harness straps waits for attention. Someone hands you a bone needle and a thread made of sinew. You sigh. Then you sew. That's the thing about Viking life. It never stops, even in winter, especially in winter. Idleness is a luxury for the very old or the very sneaky. If you sit too long, someone will hand you something sharp, heavy, or damp and expect you to do something with it. Historians still argue whether the Vikings were industrious by culture or simply by necessity. It's likely both. When you have 6 hours of daylight and 4 months of snow, you either get things done or you get left behind. You choose to get things done. As you work, the sounds of the Longhouse take on their usual rhythm. A baby coos mercifully, no longer screaming. Someone is telling a story at the far end, voice rising and falling in a melodic hum. You can't catch the words, but you hear the cadence of familiarity. The kind passed from grandmother to grandchild. Meant to soothe and distract from cold fingers and empty bellies. You focus on your stitching. The sack you're fixing has been patched 5 times already, each one with a different color of thread. You add a 6th. You do your best to keep the seam straight, but you're no master weaver. Just a willing pair of hands. Next to you, an older man is carving runes into a piece of wood. A decorative charm, maybe. Or a bit of writing practice. Runes weren't just mystical symbols. They were the Viking alphabet. There weren't enough letters for every sound. And spelling was flexible. But still literacy in some form existed. Quirky fact, Vikings sometimes carved messages into objects meant to be thrown away, like bones or sticks, just to express frustration. Basically, the original passive-aggressive post-it note. One real example reads, "I am bored with this stick." You can relate. You glance up. The room is full now. People have returned from chores, and there's a flurry of quiet, practical motion. Someone is rubbing animal fat into their boots to soften the leather. Another is sharpening a blade with slow, deliberate strokes. Children are chasing each other in tight circles near the far wall until an adult scolds them, and they collapse into a pile of giggles and straw. Despite everything, despite the stink, the smoke, the cold, there's a strange rhythm here, a kind of communal heartbeat. No one's comfortable. No one's exactly happy, but everyone is surviving, and that's its own kind of victory. You finish your mending hand off the patched gear and stretch your fingers. They ache from gripping the needle. Your lower back is one big disapproving knot. You shuffle back toward your corner, hoping to lie down again, maybe drift off for a few blessed moments. But as you pass the door, a sudden gust of wind slips through a crack and smacks you right in the earlobe. You jump. Someone across the room laughs. You give them a half-hearted glare. They shrug. The Longhouse groans, literally. The wood expands and contracts with the temperature changes. The beams creak like old bones. Somewhere, water drips rhythmically from a moss plug in the ceiling, and you somehow miraculously don't mind it. Not today. You settle back onto your straw cloak pulled tight and let your body sink into the scratchy comfort. You're still cold, still sore, but you're fed, your work's done for now, and you haven't coughed up blood or stepped in something unspeakable today. By Viking standards, that's a win. You try to rest, really. You do. But the scent hits you before your eyes even close. It creeps in slow at first, like a memory of bad choices, then fully assaults your senses with the subtlety of a slap. You know it instantly. It's the smell of the Longhouse in full bloom. Not the smoke, not the sweat. No, this is something deeper, more personal. Someone's taken their boots off again. You crack an eye open and glance toward the offender. A pair of damp wool socks dangle from a peg near the fire, steaming slightly. Whoever they belong to is oblivious, or worse, proud. The stink wafts through the room in slow rolling waves. A few people near the hearth groan and wave their hands. One mutters, "At least the goat smells like a goat." And that's the truth of it. It smells worse than it sounds. You sit up and take a deeper breath, because why not suffer properly? The air is a dense soup now. Socks, livestock dried, fish, stale mead, wet fur, and unbrushed teeth. You've begun to think of it as the house blend. You glance around. Someone is brushing straw from their tunic using a carved comb, likely shared with several relatives. A man 2 piles over is picking lice out of his beard and crushing them between his fingernails with all the care of a jeweler. Charming. Historians still argue whether personal hygiene in Viking society was above or below the medieval average. There's evidence of grooming, tools, tweezers, combs, ear picks. But there's also the reality of 40-plus people marinating together through months of darkness with no concept of a scented candle. And you're in the thick of it. You haven't properly bathed in weeks. No one has. Water freezes in the bucket. Washing up means hauling snow, melting it over coals, and then stripping in this drafty meatloaf of a building while every aunt and goat watches. You did that once. Instead, the Viking solution is layers. Hide the dirt under wool, then hide the wool under fur. Wrap it all in something leather, and try not to move too fast. Your own tunic has taken on a personality. You've named it. He's called Bjorny, and he smells like soup and failure. You sit up fully now, adjusting your cloak and shifting your legs to get circulation back. There's a squelch. You freeze. Then you check, just damp straw. Probably. You tell yourself that and move on. Someone throws dried herbs into the fire. They fizzle and crackle, releasing a sharp, piney smoke that briefly overpowers the funk. Everyone breathes a little easier. You silently praise the herb thrower. Maybe it's juniper, maybe mugwort, maybe just the driest thing they found lying around. Doesn't matter, it helps. Quirky tidbit. Some Viking households use juniper birch bark or even bits of dried seaweed as natural air fresheners. Burned them in bundles or stuffed them into wall cracks. Anything to mask the smell of damp humanity and fermented dairy. A goat sneezes, loudly. Someone laughs. A child imitates it and falls over. You smile despite yourself. You pull out your personal comb carved bone stained from years of honest use. You rake it through your hair, slowly pulling free tiny knots and straw fragments. It's meditative in a way. You remember that this comb belonged to your uncle, who swore that grooming gave him favor with Freya. He also died from tripping into a pig pen, but still he had excellent hair. You begin to notice the other noises again. The quiet scraping of someone cleaning their fingernails with a knife. The wet slurp of a dog chewing on something unsanctioned. The rhythmic creak of the ceiling beam above your head, a reminder that snow is settling heavier on the roof. You look up. The roof's thatched and layered in turf, a massive sod blanket meant to trap heat and shrug off storms. But it leaks. Oh, it leaks. Water drips from one corner into a clay bowl someone set to catch it. The bowl's half full now. You wonder how long before it overflows, and if you'll be the one to forget and step in it barefoot again. Probably. You shift back to your bedding, trying not to disturb too much. The straw rustles beneath you. Some of it's damp, all of it's scratchy. It smells like wet barn. You lie down anyway and exhale. This is life inside a Viking longhouse. There is no clean, there is no fresh. There is only degrees of filth you learn to rank and ignore. Like smells like feet is actually comforting, compared to smells like moldy seal bladder, which happened once, never again. Historians have debated whether the Longhouse served more as a living space or a symbolic center of Norse life. But for you, it's just home. Loud, smelly, crowded, drafty home. And as you finally close your eyes, nose buried in your sleeve to filter the stink, you hear one final sound, a wet, echoing plop, as something falls into the chamber pot. You do not open your eyes. The fire's gone low again, but you barely notice. You're curled tight against the cold eyes closed, trying to ride out the next few hours of darkness. Sleep here doesn't come gently. It arrives in fragments, interrupted by creaks, coughs, and someone stepping on your foot. Again. But tonight, there's a new tactic in your survival playbook. You shift slowly, quietly, making your way to the back of the longhouse. Not all the way back, that corner is claimed by the chieftain's brother, who snores like a dying walrus and smells like old cheese. But just near enough to the livestock enclosure that you can feel it. The warmth. That's right. Tonight you're sleeping beside the goats, by choice. You hear one bleat softly as you settle in. It shifts in the straw eyes, half-lidded, chewing something you don't want to identify. You move slowly, carefully, and eventually one lies down beside you. Its body heat is immediate and surprisingly pleasant. Sure, it smells like goat, but that's a small price for warmth that doesn't judge. Historians still argue whether livestock were regularly housed indoors all winter or just during storms. But here it's a practicality. Animals are currency, warmth, and future meals, all wrapped into one woolly, flatulent package. You learn to love them, or at least tolerate them, and they tolerate you right back. Your goat companion, let's call her Freya, is generous with her body heat. You tuck your feet close to her side and sigh as the warmth radiates through your boots. She makes a small burping noise. You pretend not to hear it. A few others are nearby too. Another goat, a pair of sheep, and the cow whose flank you can just make out in the gloom. She's massive warm and occasionally lets out a sigh so deep it sounds like disapproval incarnate. You shift again, pressing your back against the half wall that separates people from animals. It's not much of a wall. Just a few wooden beams, some twine, and maybe a prayer. But it marks a boundary, psychological line between human and livestock. You are now living on that line. Quirky detail. In some Norse homes, pigs and sheep weren't just tolerated indoors. They were honored with nicknames and treated like slightly dumb roommates. There are records of cows receiving carved charms to protect their health during winter. You consider carving one for Freya. She's earned it. Someone across the room coughs violently. You hear the scrape of a stool, a muttered curse, and the unmistakable sound of someone tripping over a bucket. The longhouse erupts in groans, one laugh, and the baby starts wailing again. Of course, you pat Freya's side and mumble, "Good girl." She farts in response. You choose to see it as affection. You drift for a while, half awake, half dreaming. The straw crackles beneath you. The goat shifts and nuzzles your knee. You're warmer now than you've been in days. Your face is still cold, but the rest of you has thawed enough that sleep feels less like a threat and more like a possibility. Until someone tries to join you, you feel a presence at your feet. A soft voice asks, "Is there room?" You grunt and scoot over. It's the teenager who broke the ice trough earlier. He settles in beside you, clutching a blanket and muttering thanks. Freya eyes him suspiciously. This is how it works. Hierarchies break down in the cold. Space near the livestock is unofficial currency, traded silently negotiated in elbows and nods. You gain status by proximity to warmth, not title. Tonight, you're rich. The wind howls outside again. The beams creak. The drip from the ceiling hits something hollow with perfect rhythm. And still you manage to doze, until the chicken shows up. You forgot about her Inga, the house hen. She wanders freely tolerated for her eggs and entertainment value. She hops onto your chest without warning and stares at you. Feathers, ruffled eyes, glinting like she knows all your secrets. You whisper, "Go away." She does not. Historians have noted that Viking longhouses were often in symbiosis with their animals, not just economically, but emotionally. These weren't just beasts. They were part of the household tapestry, as familiar as the hearth or the leaky roof. They were loud, smelly, endearing survival partners. You close your eyes again. Chicken on your ribs, goat at your feet, teenager snoring softly beside you. This, you realize, is as good as it gets. No storm tonight. No spilled chamber pots. Just one quiet moment in a winter made of smoke wool and hooves. And even the chicken is warm. You don't know how long you've slept, but when you wake, the longhouse is darker than ever, and somehow louder. There's a cluster of people huddled near the hearth now, but they're not working or tending the fire. They're laughing, whispering. Someone rolls a pair of bone dice onto a stretched piece of leather, and the group leans in. A soft chorus of groans and one triumphant "huh" follow. The game has begun. You sit up slowly, dislodging Freya the goat from her unofficial post as your foot warmer. She snorts, annoyed, but doesn't leave. You stretch. Everything cracks. Your neck, your back, possibly your dignity. But you're curious. It's late, too late for chores, too early for sleep to win again. Which means it's time for the only real entertainment the Viking Longhouse offers. Stories, games, and low-stakes drama. You edge closer, drawn by the gentle pull of heat and human noise. The fire's been fed again, miracle, and a few of the better wooden logs crackle brightly, throwing shadows across faces worn by cold and repetition. You settle in at the edge of the group cloak around your knees, eyes squinting against the smoke. Someone tosses the dice again, carved from goat bone marked with black ink and fire blistered for luck. The woman rolling them spits on her hand first for extra blessing or intimidation. Either way, the move works. She wins the round, and the loser has to fetch a drink of melted snow for everyone. The laughter that follows is low, but real. In this cave of cold and quiet survival, any scrap of joy is clung to like gold. Historians believe dice games were common in Norse households. Games of chance to pass the endless nights, sometimes paired with small bets, firewood scraps of cloth, maybe even the last chunk of dried meat if the stakes were truly desperate. You don't play tonight. You just watch. Let the stories wrap around you like warmth. Someone begins telling one now. It starts simply like all the good ones. There was a farmer and his wife and their daughter who was too clever for the gods. You've heard it before, many times, but it doesn't matter. It's the rhythm that soothes the familiar rising and falling of a tale shaped by generations. It moves like music, pauses in the right places, earns its laughter with a raised eyebrow and a well-timed twist. The tale unfolds. A troll tricked a feast, stolen. A clever daughter turned into a raven, and then back again, thanks to a misplaced goat skull. And the power of fermented cream. Yes, it makes sense. No, you don't question it. You lean your head on your hand, watching firelight flicker across faces. The same people who scowled during chores now smile, mouths twitching with remembered mischief. Even the elder by the wall chuckles softly when the troll gets his beard stuck in the door. Quirky fact: some Viking sagas, especially oral ones, were never meant to be entirely factual. They were moral lessons, comedic relief, and light social critique, all bundled into fantastical nonsense. And they worked. They still work. Someone begins gossiping quietly behind you. Nothing serious, just speculations. Who snuck more stew than they claimed? Who's been hiding an extra fur under their straw? Who keeps stealing the chief's wife's herbs? You pretend not to listen, but of course you do. Winter gossip is currency, and everyone's paying. The kids, meanwhile, are at the far end of the Longhouse, making their own fun. One group plays a kind of slap game involving a ball of cloth and a lot of shrieking. Another dares each other to touch the cold stone wall with bare fingers. You hear someone yelp. You smile. You notice someone sketching in the ash with the stick runes again. Not spells, not records. Just doodles. Maybe initials. Maybe a secret. The firelight dances over them until someone kicks dirt over the symbols without noticing. You lean back against the beam, letting your eyes half close. The Longhouse is alive in a way it rarely is during the day. Not with movement, but with presence. Everyone is here. Awake. Not working, not surviving, just existing. Together. It's moments like this that convince you the Longhouse is more than wood and thatch. It's a kind of living creature. It creaks, breathes, sweats, and remembers. It holds everything. Your warmth, your noise, your secrets, your smells. Unfortunately, your stories. You reach into your cloak and pull out your knife, not for violence, but for fidgeting. You pick at the hilt, half listening as someone starts a ghost story. This one you haven't heard. It starts with a drowned sailor, an unmarked grave, and a full moon. Classic ingredients. The air shifts. The laughter fades. The group leans in. The fire pops. You're no longer cold, not just because of the flames, but because this right now is how you survive the winter. Not just with chores and goats and layers of wool, but with stories, with dice, with badly timed farts and perfectly timed ghost stories. And maybe, just maybe, with a chicken asleep on your lap again. You don't even remember when she climbed back up. The ghost story ends with a scream, performed thankfully. And the kids squeal, half terrified, half thrilled. Even the adults flinch a little, then laugh it off with that shared Viking shrug that says, "We laugh because we cannot afford to scream." Someone stirs the fire again. The coals glow brighter, casting reddish shadows up the walls where smoke curls like ghost fingers along the beams. You're too relaxed to move now. The warmth has finally seeped into your joints. Your chicken has resettled herself near your hip like a stubborn cat with talons. You let her be. A quiet murmur begins as someone else steps forward. No dice, no drama this time. Just a tale, a real one, about last year's midwinter feast. You perk up. Midwinter Yalla Blot was the moment everyone waited for. The feast that lit the darkest days. And if the storyteller is who you think it is, this tale's about to get messy. He's older, this one. Beard like frostbitten moss. Wears the same fur-lined cloak year-round. He clears his throat and begins, "It started with mead," as all good things do. The audience leans in. You've heard bits of this story before, how the mead flowed, how the goat broke into the grain stores, how someone danced with an axe. But you've never heard his version. Apparently the mead wasn't just strong. It was possessed. At least that's how he explains waking up the next morning, missing one boot, a third of an eyebrow, and temporarily married to a tree. The audience laughs, not because they doubt it, but because it sounds just about right. Historians still argue whether Viking midwinter feasts were primarily religious ceremonies or excuses to let loose. The truth? Both. Sacrifices were made animal symbolic or spiritual. But so were toasts, stories, and wildly regrettable dance routines. Think holy rites with snacks and after-dinner brawling. You'll remember your own Jalla Blot. The fire was higher, the food slightly less gray, and someone brought out real honey. You danced badly. You might have kissed someone you shouldn't have. There was a goat involved. You don't ask questions anymore. Tonight's feast is still days away, but the planning has begun. Someone is already hoarding bits of smoked meat under their cloak. A woman by the wall is stringing dried berries for decoration if the toddlers don't eat them first. You suspect this Longhouse could be half dead from frostbite and still pull together a party? It's a matter of pride. Quirky aside, some Viking households train children to memorize entire poems or sagas to perform at Jola Blot, often with rewards of extra food, or in the case of failure, gentle mockery that would follow them until spring. You hear a child practicing a chant near the hearth, repeating a verse about Thor and his goats, trying not to trip over the words. The rhythm is awkward, but earnest. The Longhouse listens without judgment. Someone starts humming, a woman's voice low and steady. It's not a song you know, but it feels like something your bones would recognize. A winter lullaby, maybe, or a prayer disguised as a tune. Either way, the effect is immediate. The fire softens. The room seems to breathe. You're full now, not with food, not with warmth exactly, but with enough stories, enough laughter, enough of that sleepy shared awareness that everyone around you is also just trying to last until the thaw. You shift against the wall. The chicken adjusts. You wonder if she'll stay with you until spring. You wouldn't mind. Outside, the wind howls again. It's louder now, wilder, scraping across the thatched roof like claws. Snow hisses against the wood. The Longhouse creaks and settles deeper into itself, like an old ship weathering a slow, inevitable storm. You imagine the forest beyond black trees, crusted with frost wolves, moving silently between shadows. You imagine the sea frozen near the shore, waves crusted with ice teeth. You imagine the gods watching from somewhere colder than this, waiting to see who makes it through. You decide you will, because inside the Longhouse, you have goats and stories. You have soup and socks. You have chickens and sarcastic teenagers. You have laughter that somehow survives the dark. You have one more reason to get up tomorrow. You wake up coughing. It's deep, sharp, like your lungs are trying to escape. Your chest burns, and the air tastes like a blend of wood smoke and old onions. You sit up slowly, blanket falling off your shoulders, and realize it's not just you. Around the Longhouse, others are stirring too. Some coughing, some groaning, some just lying there, eyes open and dull. Sickness has arrived. You knew it was coming. You could feel it in the air these past few days. Heavier, more humid somehow, both dry and wet. The perfect breeding ground for whatever miserable thing always finds a way into these walls when the nights get longest. You shuffle toward the hearth joints, aching, hoping the fire is strong. It isn't. It's embers and smoke again. Of course. Astrid is already awake, hovering near the coals, tossing something into a pot. It smells sharp onions, maybe garlic, or at least something pretending to be both. She glances over and frowns. You sound like your lungs have decided to dig a tunnel out of your body. You try to laugh but end up coughing again. She hands you a cup of something hot and murky. Drink. It's the good stuff. You look down. It's broth, sort of suspiciously green. You drink it anyway. Historians still argue whether Viking households had any real knowledge of medicine or just relied on trial error and luck. Truth is, they had herbs. They had midwives. They had rituals and chants. And they had garlic, so much garlic. Garlic is in your cup right now, and probably in your pores. Someone nearby sneezes loud enough to rattle a bowl. Another child lies, wrapped in wool eyes, glassy cheeks flushed. Their mother sits beside them, murmuring soft chants to the gods or to herself. You see a man chewing on pine resin. You're told it helps sore throats. You believe it, but mostly because the alternative is doing nothing. Quirky note: Viking healers Leknir sometimes combined practical herbal remedies with rune magic. If your stomach hurt, they might give you yarrow tea and carve a protective rune into your spoon. Spiritual placebo, possibly, but it worked often enough to be passed down. You retreat to your straw, sipping your cup. The goat eyes you warily. She's already seen 3 people sneeze in her direction this morning and clearly has her own boundaries. Fair? The Longhouse feels heavier now. The air is still. The sounds are fewer. No games, no laughter, no ghost stories. Just coughing, the creak of bodies turning over, and the soft rustle of someone rewrapping their feet in cloth. You lie back and pull your cloak tight. Sweat prickles under your arms, but your feet are freezing. Classic. You tuck your hands under your knees, curl up and try to fall asleep. But sleep in a sick Longhouse is a dice roll at best. You hear everything. The whisper of a prayer, the groan of someone vomiting into a bucket, the sharp crack of the roof shifting under snow. You hear your own breathing slightly wheezy now with a rattle that wasn't there yesterday. You take another sip of garlic broth and try not to think about the odds. Astrid moves through the room slowly, now carrying cups, checking foreheads, muttering to herself. You hear her say, "It's not as bad as last year," and hope she's not lying. Last year, they say, 1/3 of the Longhouse came down with something. Or half of that group didn't see the spring thaw. And yet, here they are again. Here you are. Someone taps your shoulder. It's the teenager who shared goat space with you. He looks worse now. Red eyes, cracked lips, a wet cloth pressed to his temple. Got any honey? He rasps. You shake your head. He nods. You both know that questions become a kind of ritual. No one has honey, but it feels nice to ask. You hand him the rest of your broth. He doesn't even thank you. Just drinks it like it might bring his soul back from the edge. Outside, the storm picks up. Wind howls. Snow thumps against the side of the house like angry fists. The walls don't shake exactly, but they sigh. You feel the whole Longhouse shudder the way a body does when it's too tired to be sick anymore. Inside, people shift and murmur and do what they've always done. Endure. You lie back head-on, straw hands under your cloak and think of spring. Not flowers, not sun. Just a little breeze through an open door. A patch of dry grass. A walk without 10 layers. A day without garlic tea. But not yet. First you make it through this. With coughs, blankets, goat-side naps, and borrowed broth. With prayers carved into spoons. With silence broken only by breath, and even that sounding a bit too much like a wheeze. This is Viking winter illness. Not dramatic, not glorious, just survival. Shared misery. Soft resilience. You close your eyes again and let the smoke cradle you like a lullaby. ChatGPT said, it starts with a drip. Not a dramatic one, just a soft plip that lands squarely on your forehead. You blink groggy and look up. The moss lining in the rafters is soaked again. Another storm must have dumped a snowbank on the roof overnight. The insulation is doing its best, but at this point, the house is sweating as hard as its people. You wipe your face and sit up. Your breath clouds in front of you, even though the fire is still glowing faintly. Across the room, someone else is already mopping up another puddle with what used to be a decent cloak. The Longhouse is leaking from the ceiling, from the walls, maybe from time itself. And then you see it. Mold. Green, black, fuzzy, and blooming joyfully in the corner beam, like it owns the place. You grimace. It wasn't there yesterday. You'd swear on Thor's eyebrows. But here it is now spreading with smug confidence, like a squatter that pays in spores. You get up and poke at it with a stick. It squishes. You regret everything. Historians still argue whether moss and turf roofing helped regulate indoor humidity, or simply gave mold a friend group to thrive in. Whatever the intent, one thing's clear. This house is alive, and not always in the comforting way. You glance toward the fire and consider tossing the moldy clump in. Then, remember, burning it would probably just fumigate everyone with poison. So you leave it be. For now, back at your pile, you notice something else. Your straw bedding is damp again. Not soaked, but just enough to make you question every life choice that brought you here. You kick it around a bit, fluffing it, like that'll somehow fix the laws of condensation. Your neighbor sits up beside you. Roof's crying again, she mutters, and you both chuckle. Gallows humor is a winter tradition passed down more reliably than heirloom. A man across the room is scraping frost from the inside of the wall with a flat bone. He's gathered it into a bowl. You ask him why. Keeps it from dripping in my hair, he says. Also might be clean enough to drink. You do not pursue further conversation. There's a musty smell now, thicker than usual. Not just smoke, not just feet. Something spongier. The kind of smell that hints at decay. You wrinkle your nose and pull your cloak tighter. Quirky detail. In some Icelandic sagas, houses are described as almost sentient, creaking and warning, whispering in storms, reacting to bad omens. You're beginning to believe it. Your Longhouse isn't cursed per se, just deeply annoyed with everyone inside. You make yourself useful. Grab a broom made from bundled reeds and start brushing at the worst patches of wet straw. It does nothing. But pretending to clean is as much part of the ritual as actual cleaning. The baby cries again. The mother soothes. The goat coughs. Yes, coughs. That can't be a good sign. You hear someone mutter about mushrooms growing under the floor planks. You don't want to look. You'll deal with it tomorrow. Or maybe spring will get here first. One can dream. Despite it all, the mood is oddly steady. No one panics over the mold. No one cries about the mildew stains creeping up their tunic. Everyone simply adapts. Because what else can you do? You rotate your straw. You prop your boots on a dry beam. You shift a bucket under a new drip spot. You move the baby farther from the corner. You nudge the chicken off your seat. You cope. Someone brings out a carved board for Hnefatafel, the Viking strategy game. Two people settle in to play, not for pride or prize, just to pass time. One of them sneezes halfway through a move. The other flips the board in protest. There's laughter. Somehow, it lifts the entire room. A child near the hearth starts humming a tune again. Others join in badly off-key, half-remembered lyrics about Odin's horse and a singing squirrel. You hum too. It helps. The fire pops. A puff of smoke drifts up, hits the mossy rafter, and disperses like a ghost, fading into wood. You lean back, cloak over your shoulders, and exhale. Damp, moldy, smelly air. But air you're still breathing. The Longhouse creaks again, not in protest this time, but more like a sigh, as if even it is waiting. You lie down on your freshly rotated straw, rest your head on a rolled-up tunic, and listen to the drips, to the hums, to the long, soft inhale of 50 people trying to sleep beside each other against the odds. Tomorrow you'll scrub mold again. Tomorrow you'll find mushrooms in your sock. Tomorrow you might get lucky and spot sun through the smoke hole. But tonight, the roof only drips, and that you decide is enough. The argument begins before dawn. You're not surprised. In fact, you're surprised it didn't happen sooner. The Longhouse has been too quiet, too compliant, like a pot just starting to rattle before it boils over. And this morning it boils. It starts small. Someone moved someone else's boots. A low grumble, a sharp reply, a shrug that turns into a shove. Then voices rise, chairs scrape, and suddenly half the room is alert. Ears perked like hunting dogs pretending not to watch while definitely watching. You sit up in your straw, rubbing the sleep from your eyes with the back of your sleeve. Freya the goat stares too, chewing thoughtfully, like she's seen this exact drama before. She probably has. The two men shouting are brothers, or at least cousin adjacent. One claims the other ate more than his share of dried fish last night. The other insists the fish was already half-eaten and fair game. The debate escalates quickly into a full-blown shouting match, with plenty of references to last year's mead incident and some snide jabs about someone's weaving skills, which honestly feels unrelated. You'd laugh if you weren't so tired. Cabin fever doesn't knock. It barges in and sets your blanket on fire. And in a Viking longhouse, it's not a question of if it arrives, it's when. You've been cooped up with 40 other humans, 3 goats, 2 sheep, and a chicken that sleeps on your legs. Someone was bound to snap. Historians still argue whether Viking society handled conflict communally or let it fester privately. Inside these winter walls, it's both. No one has privacy, but no one forgets a slight either. Petty arguments grow like the mold in the rafters. The shouting continues now with more finger-pointing and a few grand gestures. You spot someone quietly sliding the cooking knife off the table and hiding it under a cloak, just in case. No one wants this to go that far, but accidents happen, especially when half the house is feverish and sleep-deprived. Someone finally intervenes. Astrid, of course. She appears between the two men like a thundercloud wrapped in wool, wielding a wooden ladle like a battle axe. Either fight properly outside, she growls, or sit down and scrape the fungus off the beams like decent folk. One of them tries to respond. She raises an eyebrow. He sits, conflict resolved. You relax back into your spot and exhale. The longhouse shifts again, settling. Breathing, pretending nothing happened. Someone coughs. Someone else starts chopping herbs too loudly. It's back to normal, or what passes for normal in a communal smoke box where goats nap next to babies and people fight over imaginary fish. You pull on your boots still damp from yesterday and get up. Today's job, wool maintenance. You've been assigned to help brush spin and organize whatever hasn't been eaten by moths or used as a makeshift towel. The spinning corner smells better than most, like lanolin and wood ash, which at this point is basically spa-level fresh. You settle next to a girl who's working the drop spindle with impressive speed. She doesn't look up as she speaks. They're going to argue again tomorrow. You nod, probably about firewood. She shrugs, or who keeps stepping on the dog. That's fair. Quirky fact. Some sagas describe winter feuds that lasted so long, they became part of the household story passed down, like songs complete with winners, losers, and exaggerated details. You imagine someone retelling today's fish fight in 20 years as the Great Herring War, probably with extra goats. As you work the wool between your fingers, you notice your nails are still dark from yesterday's mold duty. You make a mental note to clean them, then make another note to ignore that note. The work is quiet, calm, repetitive. You find comfort in the rhythm, pull, twist, wind, like time itself has slowed down to meet you. Then another voice, not angry this time, just sharp. Who moved my cloak? Everyone freezes. Again, you look at the ceiling. You whisper, not today. The teenager near the hearth raises a hand. I wore it to chop wood. I didn't think. The voice snaps back. You didn't think. It's my best one. It smells like goat pee now. Someone coughs to cover a laugh. The argument stays small this time. Sharp words, a few raised hands, no actual throwing of objects. Progress. You keep spinning. Eventually someone starts humming. The same tune from last night. This time slower, more thoughtful. Others join in. Again, it's becoming a thing now. A survival soundtrack. You wonder how many winters you'll live through in this place. How many more slow-burning feuds. How many damp cloaks, sneaky goats, and oddly tender moments wrapped in firelight and fatigue. You hope for more, weirdly, because beneath the petty arguments and creeping mold and shared chamber pot catastrophes, there's something here. Not comfort, not peace, but connection, and it's just enough. The first person to notice doesn't say anything right away. They just stop mid-motion, holding a bundle of firewood, half turned toward the hearth and stare upward. You're nearby brushing ash off your tunic for the third time today, and you notice their silence before you notice their eyes. Then you follow their gaze, and there it is, a sliver of light. Pale, cold, almost gray-blue, but it's unmistakable. The sun, it slips through the smoke hole above like a blade slicing straight down into the haze of the Longhouse and catching the dust mid-air. The beams shimmer. The air itself looks lighter somehow, not warmer but brighter. No one moves for a second. Then someone else sees it, then another. Within moments, half the Longhouse has stopped what they're doing just to look, to feel, to believe. You exhale without realizing you are holding your breath. The sun has returned. It's not full, it's not strong, but it's there. After weeks, months of gray on gray, of candlelight and firelight, and that miserable half-dawn that barely counts as morning, there it is. Real, living, honest light. It touches the back wall, slides over the storage baskets, settles briefly on a pile of cloaks, and vanishes again. A single ray, a passing glance. But enough. You sit down beside the hearth. Slowly, like a weight has shifted off your shoulders, and you're not quite sure what to do with your arms anymore. No one speaks, not loudly, not yet. It's as if words might scare it off. Even the baby is quiet. Historians still argue whether the return of the sun was marked with ritual or just internal relief. But for you right now, it's everything. A thread pulled through a dark tapestry, promising that the other end is still out there. That spring will come. That you're not buried alive in this wooden belly forever. You glance around. The mold is still there in the rafters. Someone just spilled stew into someone else's shoes. A goat has eaten half a comb. Nothing's really changed, except you. You feel your shoulders loosen. You feel your jaw unclench. You feel lighter. You walk toward the door and push it open. Not wide, just enough to peek. The world outside is white and silver, glistening with fresh snow. The storm passed in the night. The drifts have settled into smooth, undisturbed waves, glittering under the new light. Your breath puffs out in front of you and vanishes into something larger than yourself. You step out just a few feet, boots crunching on snow that squeaks like frozen leather. You look up, there it is, the sun. A weak, wobbly disk, still crouching low on the horizon, but higher than it's been in weeks. The sky behind it is soft blue, not gray. The clouds are thin, and the light actually warms your face, just barely, but you feel it. You smile. Back inside, you hear someone laugh, a real one. Someone else starts humming the same old tune, but with a different rhythm now. Livelier, hopeful, maybe even off-key. You walk back in and take a deep breath of smoky, moldy livestock-laced air, and it somehow smells better now. The same but different, because now there's an ending. You sit down beside Freya. She snorts and shifts so you can warm your feet again. The chicken hops onto your lap unapologetic. You let her. The fire cracks. You survived. With goats and garlic and gossip. with leaking roofs, shared blankets, and arguments over dried fish, with dice games, ghost stories mold, and midwinter mead, with patience, with stubbornness, with people who probably drive you crazy, but who were beside you every freezing, coughing, soggy day. The light is back, and you're still here. You lie back now, and everything feels a little softer. The sounds of the Longhouse melt into the background. Low laughter, a crackling log, someone humming off-key. The snow outside no longer feels like a threat, but a blanket covering the world in hush. Your body is still sore. The floor is still hard. There's straw poking your elbow and something damp near your foot. But you don't care. Not tonight. You pull the cloak up to your chin and let your eyes drift shut. Your breath is steady now. Deep. The kind of breathing that comes when the danger has passed. When your body, tired and tough, finally gets permission to rest. Someone whispers nearby, a bedtime tale for the smallest ears. You catch fragments, something about a fox, a fish, and the northern lights. The child giggles once, then sighs. You smile into the dark. Outside, the sky is clearing. The stars are slipping back into their places. The moon rises quiet and silver. Somewhere wolves howl, but it's a distant sound muffled by the snow. And inside, the fire is strong. Sleep wraps around you now like your best fur, warm, familiar, smelling faintly of wood smoke and something sweet. You let go. You float. You are not alone. Not now, not ever. And when spring comes, you'll be ready. But for now, you rest. You sleep. You dream. Sweet dreams, friend. End of script. Sweet dreams.